So I don't think you were quite as aware of what an impact you had on me growing up at Sutton Valence. You being my rugby and strength and conditioning coach, it really kind of set me on the path I'm on today. And I mean, we had dinner last night, and I kind of mentioned to you all the things that just the way you acted around the team has had an impact on my coaching and the way I am with people. Back then I didn't really acknowledge the amount I was kind of learning from you from a young age. And it's always been to me like you learn a lot growing up from the way people act around you, how they are. You were very observational and took time to kind of listen and answer questions. And what kind of made you want to get into coaching, and why did you kind of act in that way?
Well, I mean, firstly, thank you for dinner last night. It was a really enjoyable. I mean, the Bell's an incredible place, right? And brilliant conversation last night. So thank you for your time. For me, Guy, I think looking back, and you got me thinking, about it, and when you mentioned the impact you feel that it had on you, I was trying to sort of pinpoint anything that sort of drove me to sort of, how do I draw a line, myself. And I think that one thing that really impressed me about you and your peer group, there were some brilliant lads in that group, was all your sort of dedication and determination. It takes a lot for a 14-year-old, young man to be going to the gym at 6 a.m. in the morning, and turning up the next day with calluses, there's baby soft hands, and just lifting the weights and just going at it again. And I think that there was a group of you together in quite a sort of small, supportive environment, up in the accommodation. I think you were all boarded, didn't you?
Yeah.
Throughout the time. So you had that real sort of tight network, and through my sort of just observation, really, it was just around, these are lads who really want to try and, push themselves. Very, very positive, very supportive of each other. Clearly, a very caring group, and that was extremely evidenced when we all went away and had some real time together in Canada.
Yeah.
So that was pretty interesting. So I think that's really, where I take a lot from the people around me. If someone wants to really put in, then why wouldn't I give them my time, and effort? And I think that you in particular, but certainly, Callum will be another one, Dan Tier and a few others at that time. Just the whole sort of group together, I thought, you're brilliant young lads,
Yeah. Being in that dynamic. I guess it's when you're at school, when you're boarding, it was like the perfect way to have that team element, and that's why we did well at rugby at school. But everything that kind of goes on off the pitch. It was, spending time together, going out on the weekends, partying with one another. It just builds such a bond amongst the lads that makes that team element that much more. I mean, what I noticed when, for instance, when I went out of school and I had a season where we played for Tunbridge Judgeons and we went on to win the National Cup, which was awesome. But that group of lads there, we were all so close. We were meeting up out of school, very, very close-knit of friends. And then when I went on to go play for Quins, there wasn't that bond. It was much more a set of individuals who were very talented, but not too much connection amongst them in the academy. And I always thought, that TJ's team, because we were so well bonded together and we played so well as a team, you probably would have beaten the Quins lads, because they've, a lot of talent there, but not quite the connections. I mean, what for you, how did you kind of create that at Sutton Valence? I mean, you couldn't obviously have influence over us of what we kind of did in our social time, but what factors do you kind of bring into teams to help them build that bond?
For me, I'm a big one after like environment, and it's not just the physical, it's the emotional side of things as well. So when I first arrived at the school, which was an unusual thing, for me to actually, be a little independent school, I was blown away with the sort of the construct of the whole facilities and the accommodation, the dining hall. It reminded me very much of my early time with Seven Power when we were in Aldershot, and literally used to fall out your bedroom window onto the rugby pitch. And you only had to walk 50 metres, but from the accommodation block you were there. 40 metres you're in the gym, maybe 30 metres you're in the dining hall. So everything there was all based around the perfect environment where you take down all those barriers. If you had to go and maybe drive 5 miles, go off site to a gym, how often would you guys go to the gym?
Yeah.
So really that was the sort of the physical side of things. And if you remember, one of my first things I did, I walked in the sports centre, and I went into the gym, and there was blinds all on the gym, and there was the CV equipment in there and some fixed machines in there. And it was at lunchtime, and all the kids were in there in their uniform, and there was one of the lads in the sixth form, and the big lad, and he was in his uniform. He was on the lap pull-down machine with a girl sat on his lap, and he was doing single pull-downs. And I was just like, wow, what is this place? This is like, it reminded me like one of those old scenes from the old Vietnam films, just about the opium. So the first thing I did was I took all the blinds down.
Yeah.
And then went with Mr. Alderman Graham and sort of set about trying to split the CV equipment down and the actual gym, because one of the big things I recognised was the challenge around, again, environments, making it safe for people to go and learn. So by doing that, and then just getting a couple of light, weights in the gym there, in was very much a goldfish bowl. For me then, it was around the environment was making it safe for you guys to go in and train, because if you probably remember the first sort of month, 2 months, people, blowing faces at the windows, all different hand signals, and, just as like that goldfish bowl, everyone, whoa, look at you, and soon people got bored.
Yeah.
I knew they would. So then it just become the norm. And I think the greatest success from that environment that I get feedback from through my daughter, who's still at the school, is from one of the other teachers, Mr. Penfold, and how his son really enjoyed the environment, and how he really kicked on and had that sense of community that you did, and off site, they would go and do different bits and pieces with a whole friendship group, and it was all born around that gym and that safe place for them to go and express themselves with no sort of pressure on performance necessarily. It was very much just about learning to train. So if you've got the right environment, you got pointed in the right place, you come with the right intent as you guys did, then it really is the foundation, I believe, for a good journey going forward. Yeah,
I mean, you really enabled me to, sorry, and if you just hold the mic a little bit closer, Chair. There we go, perfect. You kind of enabled me to experiment with a lot of training styles, because I had kind of my county and maybe my Quins training plan. We had a school training plan, but I was a little bit more like, I want to see what my body can do. And I was experimenting with CrossFit, powerlifting, strongman lifts, Olympic weightlifting, and you kind of let me just run with it and see, experience all these different styles for myself, and kind of not really watch from a distance, but you sometimes come in and ask just good questions. So like, why are you doing that today? What's the purpose behind it? Well, that's interesting, and like kind of curious to where I was kind of learning it from, which gave me the confidence to try a lot of stuff out. And it's a really kind of nice way of kind of, because you were teaching me new things without actually doing anything, because you were allowing me just to kind of try out all this new stuff. And you could kind of, because I was self-teaching, right, and you were enabling that, rather than going, guy, no, this is your program, come on, stick to this, and you got to do X, Y, and Z today. So that kind of allowed me to build up a lot of information on strength and conditioning from the ages of 14 through to 18. That I was kind of had a little bit more freedom around it, which built my love for fitness, which inevitably led to my career. But for you, where did your love for fitness come from? Where did that all originate from?
Oh, that's a big question. I mean, my love of fitness, really, I truly believe come around survival, really, in the sense that when I was growing up, I was very fortunate as a 6-7-year-old, down the local rugby club with my dad, and that was brilliant. And then we moved off to Scotland, and it was pretty tough up there. It was not many English people up there, and as 11, 12-year-old, I was in endless fights, for being English, and so really fitness become about survival and it was around just having the ability to try and fight back. So I sort of put onto that quite early, and that sort of continued. I only look back now with hindsight, but with my dad being in the Air Force, moving every 2 years, there's a massive upheaval, and then trying to find your place within a new group, and in a new place. So everything was different, So it was a case of having to adapt. And quite often, I was the odd person out. I certainly felt it, and so it became a bit of sort of my own self-regulation, really, and my own ability to sort of survive within those environments. Because moving to a new place and standing out, I often found I got myself in a bit of bother, which sort of led me perfectly up to really joining the parachute brigade. And
how old were you when you joined?
So I joined the army at 17.
Yeah.
It wasn't a career I was destined for, or maybe it was. It certainly was a spur of the moment decision to go and get myself in the careers office and apply. I really didn't think I'd be accepted.
Yeah.
But it turns out that people of my ilk at that time were actually very well suited, and I'm forever grateful for the support I got there. Although sometimes it was pretty tough, but adding that discipline and structure around the chaos at the time was perfect. So yeah, I joined the army at 17, and then the parachute brigade at 18.
Why the parachute brigade?
So I lived in Hereford before I joined up, and around there was a lot of special forces guys and everything else, and so I had an awareness, not too much of an awareness at the time. I was a bit sort of I wouldn't say anti-establishment, but with my dad being in the Air Force and just the experience that I had, I'd sort of got into a bit of my punky type stuff, and anti-authority, anti-war, I guess, and really what sort of set me up was in the 1991 there was the Gulf War, and we were all affected by it. My dad being in the Air Force, there was a couple of Tornado pilots who were basically captured and held hostage out in Iraq. You then had all the special forces guys, and obviously all the stories coming back from those fellas. So it was pretty much a spontaneous decision to, off the back of that, really, to just go, right, I'm going to go and join. I think this is the right thing for me. And I wanted to be as part of the elite. You know, I didn't want to just join the regular army. I didn't have a huge, knowledge of it. But yeah, I went in the careers office and there was a picture of some guy parachuting. The guy behind the counter was a parachute regiment, sergeant. And I thought, yeah, this is a bit of me. Want to be part of the elite. Want to push myself. And yeah, that's how I sort of ended up making that decision.
Mm. And then, and your kind of career in the parachute regiment, what was that like?
Yeah, so my regiment was it's part of the parachute brigade. So it was 7th Parachute Regiment Royal Horse Artillery. So it wasn't one of the parachute regiments. They're the infantry guys, and at the time it was 1, 2, and 3 para. Phenomenal fellas, in those units. But my unit was sort of quite a hybrid one, really, in the sense that you had some very elite field soldiers. I mean, everyone was an elite soldier in that sense, but some of them would be around gunnery. So actually working, actually on the guns themselves, and then you'd have elements of signals and elements of other support elements, mechanics and medics and that sort of stuff. But really my ambition, once I'd got in there and started to understand it, was to be part of the spearhead within the brigade, within the regiment, through the observation post guys, and so that would sort of required, something a little bit different, where you really, your job was around field soldiering, marching long distances, and just supporting the officers effectively and the senior guys within the troop to coordinate fires.
Yeah, and I mean, you were obviously playing rugby at the same time as in when you were in the forces. How did you manage that balance between the two?
Yeah, this is where I sort of look back, and I'm forever grateful for that sergeant in the careers office. He said, look, go to 7 para, and they were the regiment. So when I first joined, my big challenge, really, I'd only played one senior game of rugby prior to joining the army, was to make the regiment a rugby team, because they were currently army champions, and the only way I could do it is by playing on the wing. So I had a couple of frustrating years there, and this is the early 90s, and the game was still amateur. And then in 95, the game went professional, and the regiment carried on with its success. And then eventually I progressed on to the army in sort of 1996, playing for the senior team, and would play against a lot of the Premiership teams. And we were competitive against them at the time, and I got a phone call from actually 2 Premiership clubs, London Scottish at the time and Gloucester, and they asked me if I wanted to come and join them, and I spoke to my regiment, and they gave me their blessing, and that was it. They gave me a year off to go and pursue that as a dual sort of career, if you like.
And so you were Gloucester was your main club?
Gloucester for a season was my club. Yeah.
Did you enjoy it there?
It was incredible. I mean, from my background to suddenly then having this freedom to be around some brilliant guys, and I've got still a lot of great friends from there. There was another 2 guys from the army playing for him, a guy called Brian Johnson, BJ, and then another guy, Rory Greenslade Jones. And Rory was actually in 7 para as well. And we worked it out a little while ago. He's the guy I played the most games of rugby with throughout my career, and it's over 320 games of rugby we played together. Wow. So Rory, we're pretty tight, as I am with BJ. But then there was Phil Vickery there and Neil McCarthy. I'm actually good friends with the S&C coach still, Ed Archer. So yeah, it was a phenomenal club, phenomenal experience, but a little bit a little bit choppy along the way, and at the end of the season, actually, I left to go to Kosovo, and with the regiment.
Mm-hmm. And how was that transition from rugby in the Premiership in England, probably playing some of your higher standard stuff? I know you did England Sevens before, but then transitioning to war, what was that like for you?
At that point, it was, it was almost a relief, which I know probably sounds quite peculiar, but my time at Gloucester, I was flying, to start with, and it was going really well. And then, a couple of months into it, maybe 4 or 5 months into it, actually my best friend from my youth, a guy called Alistair Bush, he actually got killed in an RTA, and I haven't really spoke about this much, but that was a huge sort of blow at the time, and hugely sort of challenging. He was really just my only sort of anchor to my past. As I said, when I sort of spontaneously joined up from Hereford, it was like, right, I'm going, and so to lose Alistair, really sort of whacked me. I guess also I sort of career found myself in the sense that also me and Rory would always sneak off to go and play rugby for our regiment. So there was always a little bit of tension there. If you're missing a day's training because you're playing for your regiment, that was also very hard for the coaches to prepare. But nevertheless, it was I had the most amazing time. But at the end of the season, my best mate Charlie Bentley, my roomie from the regiment, phoned me up and was like, "Do you want to go to Kosovo?" So it was like, yeah, I understood what that was all about, and it was sort of right. I can park up the rugby. Now I'm just going to go and do what really I felt was my destiny to go and serve with the brigade. Out in was quite lively environment.
And how long were you stationed out there?
So our job was very specific, and we were out there maybe no more than 10 weeks.
Yeah,
it was out, hit it hard, and then come home.
Yeah, and that transition back into normal life post that, you mentioned it was a relief being in there. In what sense was that? Just getting away from the stresses of life? I mean, I know you mentioned to me last night. You said in a way you have no stress. You just have the operation and the task itself, and in a way there's a bit of a stress relief. But then re-entering back into life with all life stresses and everything else going on. I mean, what can you try and articulate to people what that kind of feels like?
Yeah, this is all. Obviously in hindsight, I was just sort of living it at the time, and it was about it was the end of July, and we had probably about a week to go, and my battery commander come and saw me. We were in this burnt out Opel garage, just kipping on the floor and patrolling every day, and he says, "All right, we're going home now." He said, and thanks very much for coming and being part of the gun battery. Out on the Kosovo mission, and he said, "Look, would you like to have another year off?" So I was like, "Yeah, hell yeah!" And he actually gave me the bat phone. We had a sat phone, and I phoned my agent up, and I said, "Look, can you find us a job?" He was quite surprised to hear from me because obviously, I was out in Kosovo, and as I said, it was quite lively. And he said, "Leave it with him." So a week later, I arrived back in Aldershot, and I hadn't appreciated probably how much internally I was in turmoil. But my agent John, he'd got me a job at Coventry, so it was almost like an instant stepping back into it. And that following week, I was training with him, and the week after, I played my first pre-season game with them. And that's how it continued. So it was literally, straight out of, Kosovo within a week back in the rugby.
Jeez. But I mean, it just sounds like consistent structure, right? For you from the age of 18, I mean, it was either professional rugby or in the para brigade. And there's so much structure applied to your life. Did you like that almost you didn't really have to think, everything was kind of like, okay, you got a game this weekend or you got to do this week? I mean, is that something you enjoyed, or?
I think for me, I needed to sort of be around loose structure. I hate sort of really that sort of tight constraints, and in many ways, if I wouldn't have done the rugby through the army, I'd have been out the army. And actually, me and Charlie had spoke about it, and he actually got out for almost a year. So the flexibility was there, but then also the structure, and the structure come from around being purpose driven and around being around great people. So I'd sort of chase that, and if I didn't have that, then I think that for me it was a sort of sense of loss and too much time to sort of think over other things and get consumed with that. I've always been quite an overthinker, which can be useful, but it can be quite detrimental. So actually, the chaos in some ways of like getting back and then trying to organise to go again into the Coventry at that point was a real blessing, because it meant I didn't have to do too much broader thinking. It was just a case of doing and being part of something. So that was really welcome at the time, but it did come at a bit of a cost, I guess.
And how many years did that go on for? Going between like professional rugby and back into the Red Parachute Brigade?
Yeah, I probably need to break that down a little bit, because when I was at Coventry in the November, so I'd only been back from Kosovo for about 4 or 5 months, my body broke down. I was playing for the combined services against the Barbarians over at Gloucester, and I literally couldn't feel my left leg. Toe labrum reflexes, throughout, and I was sort of hopping around and, in a lot of pain. And I mentioned to the head coach, look, I can't play, I can't feel my leg. He said, well, you got to play. So I did. And, I spent half the game hopping around, and at half time, I was just like, look, I can't carry on. So that was it. So, I finished that game, and then for the next couple of weeks I just couldn't walk, and every time I attempted to walk I just collapsed. I was in a bit of a bad way, and I had a good friend who was at Headley Court, which is the big tri-service hospital at the time, and it's very quiet pre 9/11 wars. And I managed to get in there, and they treated me, and I went for scans and all the rest of it, and that was it. The scan was pretty conclusive. I'd prolapsed 3 discs in my lower back, and it was like, right, you're never going to play rugby again, and that's it. And that wasn't an option. So this was 2000.
So how old were you at the time?
So I was probably 26.
Yeah,
26, 27. So that was it. And as I said, that wasn't an option. So I'd set about trying to put a plan in place. I was getting full-time treatment at Headley Court. I was going away from that, doing my own rehab in the evening, and just, I needed something. And I spoke to the Army head coach, and he didn't believe me, but I said, look, if I get fit, will you give me the Army Navy game? And so I had a focus, and he said, yeah, he'd do that. And I managed to, over the sort of next 3-4 months, get myself into a position to be eligible again. With the brilliant treatment from Gareth and Angela, at the time at Headley Court and on my rehab, I was able to start to move again and you know, back to some serious training. And then he fucking changed his mind.
No way.
the Army head coach. So I blew up at him and I told him exactly what I felt. But then the oddest thing happened, and that was the guy who was then going to play the Army Navy, a great friend, he's a Special Forces helicopter pilot, a guy called Lee Woodhouse. He broke his leg. Mm-hmm. So it was like, right, you can have the game before. We're playing against Bath as a final pre-Army Navy prep game. And if that goes all right, then we'll consider it. And it went all right, and I played Army Navy. Fast forward a year, and so this is 2001 now, and just before the Army Navy game, I got banned for 63 days. And the person who stepped in was Woody. So he got his cap a year later.
Yeah.
So,
brilliant.
Yeah, so it all worked out all right. But no, so I managed to get myself back to fitness, played Army Navy, and then got myself a season with Harlequins. And as I mentioned, you know, in the season with Harlequins, I was still sneaking off to play for my regiment, and actually I got cited playing for them.
What for?
So I probably need to give you some context because military rugby was pretty tough in the sense that there's a lot of, you know, regimental pride within it. So early 2001, we had a game on our regimental barracks against 2 Para, and 2 Para hated us and we hated them, and that's what, you know, sort of drove us to the people that we are, like, you know, highly competitive, but also, you know, when we were combined together on operations, you know, you'd have that mutual respect for each other. But anyway, they drew us, and as I said, we were Army champions. They were more into their boxing and their running, and, you know, some phenomenal athletes there, but they still fancied their chances. So for 2 weeks prior to the game, they kept phoning up our guard room and just basically telling the people on guard they were going to fill us in and fight us and all the rest of it. And every morning, like, the guard commander would stop us as we were going out rugby training, saying, "Oh, those wankers from 2 Para, you know, phoning up the guard room at 2 o'clock in the morning. We're going to kill you." And so this is the context of what it was. So sure enough, that they arrived at our barracks, and they come, you know, with 100 odd supporters, and as I mentioned earlier, around the rugby pitch was all the accommodation blocks, so we used to all just fall out of there, and every game used to be what we call a scale parade, so everyone not on essential duties would come and watch. So there was like maroon berets everywhere, and there was 2 Para, 7 Para, and the rugby started, and we were tooled up. We probably had 10 guys who played Army at the time, and you've just got these violent lads from 2 Para who just wanted to scrap us. So it was maybe 20 minutes into the game, we were a few scores up, so the outcome was inevitable. But that's not how they roll, and it all blew off.
Yeah,
and it didn't just turn into a 30-man fight. There must have been probably 20 or 30 guys from the sidelines from 2 Para who joined in the fight.
Oh, jeez.
Which then meant some of our guys, 20 or 30 guys from our side, joined the fight. So there was 100 people fighting on this pitch. Jesus. And eventually, you know, it all sort of quietened down, and that was it. And you know, there was broken noses and there was blood everywhere. And, you know, one of the lads lost his mobile phone in the mud. It was, you know, so we spent half an hour trying to ring the mud, you know, trying to find his phone. And yeah, it was incredible in the sense that the brigade commander afterwards, you know, was like, yeah, rugby played in great spirits. And this is what we sort of chased after. And I love 2 Para for the fact that it was very much, you know, the parachute mentality that against all odds, they still showed up for the fight.
Yeah.
And they delivered on that regards.
And so I guess it's the transition from that to Prem rugby.
Yeah. So after the 2 Para game, we got through the quarter final against 2-2 Air Defence. Our artillery arch rivals. These lads have been preparing for this game for for a very long time. There's some quality army players within their setup. They were disbanding, so they had a lot of regimental money which they used to go on tour to Australia, and this was it. This was their opportunity, and the game was tough, and their hooker kept cheating. The referees, they didn't have touch judges to be the extra eyes, so he was reliant on them, and the ref actually positioned himself the wrong side of the line out. So their hooker, as we'd win their line out back, it happened a couple of times, he'd come around our side of the ball and just clamp onto it and just sack it. So the first time he did it, I told him not to do it again. Second time he did it, I shouldn't have done it, but as I got up, I just flicked my heel out, and it caught him, and that was it. And it wasn't a brilliant thing to do, but in again the context of the game, boots on the body at that time was rugby, and reckon out. I mean, he was cheating, and I shouldn't have backheeled him, but I did, and as a consequence, I'm not sure. I think he went off, but that was it. His rugby officer, who allegedly said he saw it, he was jumping up and down, and I didn't know this. The only way I found it out is when I heard that I was up for a citing, and because I was at a professional rugby club, you could cite someone in retrospect. So despite having no evidence other than contradictory statements from people from his regiment, who I have no doubt, were under some sort of pressure to say that, because some of the comments were quite elaborate, let's say, and that was it. On the probability of it happening, it probably did, according to the RFU disciplinary panel, and they dished out a 63-day ban, which then had other consequences. As I mentioned earlier, it meant that because of the ban, I couldn't play Army Navy. The Army were also touring Hong Kong and China. So I missed out on that. I got sacked from Harlequins, and then on top of that, I then heard through the sort of grapevine that the Special Investigation Branch in the Army were asking questions about this rugby game.
Oh my goodness!
And
not the one before.
And not the one before. and I'd like to say the one before was a rare occasion, but it wasn't that rare.
Yeah.
It was service rugby at that time. So the Special Investigation Branch of the Royal Military Police were also asking questions, and there was no deliberate sort of falsifying of evidence from the guys from our place. All the lads said they didn't see it because they didn't see it. It was at the end of a line out. I backheeled someone, and that was it. So obviously, nothing further was from there. But it obviously left a real bitter taste, and in typical sort of fashion, I just sort of threw myself into my fizz over that time, and just got amongst it. And as I mentioned to you and your dad earlier on, at that same sort of time, we had an influx of Fijians who joined the British Army. So still while serving this ban, I sort of continued my training, and actually at the end of that 63 days, it was sort of June, July time, 2001, and I managed to make the Sevens squad. We then got our second invite to the Middlesex Sevens quite late, and we actually went on and beat Newcastle in the final and won the Middlesex Sevens.
Brilliant.
So that was off the back of that. So yeah, it was a phenomenal rebound, let's say. So I did that, and just getting back into a bit of pre-season. One of my real close mates, Jim, phoned me up, and Bracknell had made what is the championship now. I think it was Nat 1 then. And he asked me if I wanted to come and join them. I was reluctant because of the sort of bitter pill, really, of the ending of my Harlequin season. But when he offered me a bag of money to go and do it, I was like, yeah, let's do it. So that was it. I started at Bracknell, but no sooner had the season started than 9/11 happened in the Twin Towers. I was actually with Jim at the time. Happened, and obviously the world was going to change, and it did in dramatic style. So I continued, playing a little bit for Bracknell. It was a tough time. They weren't of that standard. Despite recruiting a lot of players, we just weren't of the championship standard at that point. So it was tough, but also some of the lads had deployed to Afghanistan with the regiment, and as we ticked into 2002, the rumours started to go that the axis of evil was opening up, and they were bringing other countries into this war on terror. One of those being Iraq. So that was early 2002. At the same time, I got a phone call asking if I wanted to go and play England Sevens, and I almost didn't go. It was a competition in Wellington, obviously New Zealand, but the temptation and the opportunity to sort of play for your country at Sevens, was just too much. So I went there in the end of February 2002. Went back to the regiment, played in the Army Cup. We won again that year, and then I got a call again to go and play England Sevens in Malaysia, and that was it. I was like, right, again, I wasn't going to go. Same sort of feeling as the New Zealand feeling, but then I sort of made a promise to myself that I'm going to do this as the last one, and I'm just going to tell them straight that I'm not going to do any more, and that was it. And we went out to Malaysia. We won the plate final, and I told the coaching staff and all the players that was it. The likelihood was that our regiment were going to go to Iraq, and I'm sort of throwing my towel in, really, and giving up on playing, any sort of rugby that could put my sort of military side of things in jeopardy. I felt pre-Kosovo, whilst it was a full-on tour, I felt that I probably I hadn't been prepared enough, because I'd been at Gloucester for the year, and then literally a week later I was on the border with Kosovo, and as I say, it was a pretty full-on tour. To be in the same situation going into Iraq, I didn't want that, so I just threw in the towel with the England Sevens, and got back into regimental life. And then early 2003 we went out to Kuwait, and then into Iraq in 2003.
So military was more of a priority for you over rugby?
I think that they served each other.
Yeah.
But I think that when the time come, and this is true of Rory, who I mentioned before, and Lee, if you're serving in the British services, and the British military, and for us, serving within Seven Para, it was always your mates first, and it always is your mates first, and that's forever lasting, and I think that they had choices as well as I had choices. We didn't have to still be in the army. We'd all been playing professional rugby, and that was a genuine career option for all three of us. But we all stayed, and then when the call came, we all went. And I think that was just sort of testament to the bonds that you have, but also the moral obligation that you have. So they served each other. But then obviously when the call come, there's only one option really, and that's to be with your mates and go and serve wherever we were asked to serve.
And how did you find it the second time round?
What, going to Iraq?
Yeah.
It was a different
So second time around, as in second tour.
So I'd actually been to Bosnia before that, and I went there back in '97. That was very much peacekeeping, and Kosovo was the same sort of theatre. Whilst it, different country, it was within the former Yugoslavia. So, the sort of the environment was very similar. This was totally different. This was weapons of mass destruction, shock and awe. This was, big guns, against big guns allegedly, and it was a very different environment. So I think it was helpful for me having the experience of Kosovo, which was at war at the time when we were deployed in North Macedonia, although we went in as an enforced peacekeeper. Iraq was very much, we were going to go there and, with the Americans and a very small, broader coalition to oust, Saddam Hussein and that regime from Iraq. I think the whole thing was similar in the sense that you knew the risk and you parked up the risk, but actually going to theatre, you just focusing on your job and just dialed in, and we're just in that moment.
And was it around 10 weeks you were out there for?
So Iraq, we did probably, I would say, the most of January we spent just preparing. Once we had the call, just before the new year, we spent on Salisbury Plain in the horizontal rain, preparing to go to the desert. And then we did some calibration with the parachuting staff. I hadn't realised, but they'd changed the parachutes and all sorts. And I hadn't jumped for a couple of years. So they were basically saying, look, you can't do the training, the parachute training, because you're out of date, because there's certain windows. And I was like, you're fucking joking me. We're going to Iraq and you're telling me that I can't parachute. I'm parachute trained. And so we had this, I wouldn't say argument, but I pleaded with their better side that, look, I was para-trained, we're doing parachute jumps, we can probably get around the the rigid structure of the time frames of jumping or not. So eventually they agreed. So all the rest of the lads were doing all their ground training, getting ready to go and getting their chutes on. And the last minute they went, yeah, come on then. Me and Lee, you can go in and do it. And as I walked into the hangar, we were going to jump about an hour later, and I hadn't even seen the parachute before. So the guys had to fit me up, and that was it. Yeah, so a totally different system. And
walk me through what it's like jumping out of a plane. I mean, what's that really feel like?
I loved it, and the guys would all say that they loved it, but then we also hated it.
Yeah.
In many ways, it's minging. I lost count of how many times the aircraft was tech before, there'd be a problem with it before, you actually embark on it, so you'd be sat there just waiting in your kit for 4 or 5 hours. Then eventually you get on it, and you still haven't, so you haven't eaten at that point, you haven't drinking much, and you just sat in your kit and you just like, want to get this over and done with. And then you go and fly low level for 2-3 hours maybe. I jumped out in Scotland, jumped over in France, all taken off from England. So it's a lot of low level, and so you'd be bobbing away. And as you can imagine, if you're hedge hopping in a fat, slow, stinking aircraft with lots of blokes around you, everyone's being sick. The Air Force guys would obviously issue you with the mandatory sick bags and expect you to carry your sick with you, which obviously we didn't. We just leave it in underneath the seats. And I'd have the pleasure of 20 sick bags to clear up once we jumped out. And then, you know, with all the equipment, I mean, you had some heavy kit. Because I was very limited in my skill set, let's say, but I was useful at carrying heavy kit. You know, I'd sort of carry, you know, you sort of 100-pound Bergens, you know, with just like loads of batteries and, you know, replacement radios and that sort of stuff. So often I'd be one of the first men out of the aircraft because I'd have a heavy container, just really facilitating other people. So by the time you're ready to go, your back's breaking, you know, you're minging, there's sick everywhere. But then you get that buzz and the door gets opened and you get the red on call and you march to the door and you're looking out and that's it. It's just like, let's go.
Yeah.
And, for that sort of 20 seconds you're in the air, it's so exhilarating because you're weightless.
Yeah.
You know, you drop your kit and, you know, hopefully your parachute is fully inflated, which is not always the case. And then hopefully you'd make the landing all right, which obviously wasn't always the case either. You know, we have some pretty heavy bumps at times. But once you did and you hit the ground, we used to have this little apex tie, which, you know, used to go on the end of your parachute. We used to hook up the parachutes at the end to dry them out. That'd be the first thing you get after your little souvenir. I fucking survived another one.
Yeah.
And that was it. But so the camaraderie and just the exhilaration of jumping out of it was, you'd soon forget about all the other nonsense and I'm fucking airborne.
Yeah.
And, so it was class and not for everyone, but it certainly, you know, for those who did it, you know, that's our sort of, you know, our bond really.
Yeah.
Yeah. So no, amazing really.
So post Iraq, I mean, we must, where are we on the timeline now? 2004?
No, 2003.
Yeah.
So I got back in the May, I think.
Yeah.
Yeah, May of 2003.
Gotcha. And then what happened? I mean, rugby, had you completely hung up your boots by that point?
No, so I carried on playing for the army and both 15s and 7s. I flirted with a couple of different clubs, and again, it's just in reflection, but my head wasn't really in the best place, let's say. And it just didn't feel right. So I really, you know, I loved playing for my regiment. I played for our core team, so the Royal Artillery, the Gunners. I played for the Army Combined Services and then the Army 7. So I was getting my fix there, and actually 2004 we won the Middlesex Sevens again, beat Gloucester in the final, which was, you know, an amazing occasion. By then we'd had another, you know, brilliant Fijian join the squad. There's only small tweaks from the team that won it in 2001, but a guy called Asoa Damu, who went on to play 50 tournaments with England at Sevens. What was Fiji's loss was England's gain. He was supposed to have gone in 2005 to play for Fiji in the Rugby World Cup, which they won. Apalisi Satala, another Army guy who was with our Sevens team, went with them and won the World Cup with them. And,
brilliant.
But Damu was injured. He was my roomie at the time, and, you know, watching the finals, you know, the World Cup finals was tough. You know, this is a very proud Fijian, you know, and his country went on to win the World Cup Sevens, as I say, in 2005, and he should have been part of that. But Mike Friday, who was then the England head coach, recognised his brilliance, and he qualified at that point to play for England. So in the following year, as I said, he went on and that was it, 50 tournaments later.
Yeah. Wow. And what are some of the best players you've played with in your career? Like, not necessarily the most famous, but the ones where you've gone, wow, like that's talent on another level.
Well, I think for me, and it's difficult not to get away from the bias of the regiment. Mm-hmm. You know, when I joined, as you can imagine, as an 18-year-old, and you know, he's like, you play rugby? Yes, sir. Right, you're fucking on the wing. Like, yes, sir. You know, you're part of all that, and you know, you then got these guys who are proper men. You know, who'd won the Army Cup and you know, hugely talented, and they were consistent. So they then become your friends and mentors, and yeah, in particular, you know, the tight prop Jim Fowers. You know, he was just an extremely tough man, and you know, hugely high standards in everything that he did on and off the rugby pitch, and that was true of all of them. You know, one of my early gun number ones was a guy called Podge Dickinson, and again, just a phenomenal athlete, phenomenal bloke, phenomenal soldier, and they all lived by this sort of standard that we needed to be the best soldiers in the regiment. Whether we achieved that or not, that was for other people to decide, and a lot would argue, certainly in my case, no. But you know, if you wanted to play for the rugby team, there was a privilege. So then that privilege, you needed to, you know, show that around the regiment. So in terms of the most talented rugby players, they probably weren't the most skillful, but at the time, they were just men of real character, who, you know, who set me up, you know, in really many ways on a rugby career, but then also as a soldier, and then also as a person. Yeah.
What do you feel makes the difference between a great rugby player and a good rugby player? When I played, you know, there was a lot of good rugby players around, but making that next step up into professional rugby, I mean, what kind of characteristics? I know you've now been coaching for almost 15 years, around then. What's that difference? Is it the mentality? Is it the physicality? What is it?
Yeah, I think coaching on the pathway and then just looking back at the people who I just sort of mentioned there for the Regiment rugby team, I think that for me, it's largely around, you know, character. But undeniably, you know, I'm surrounded, you know, by people who are hugely talented. But they wouldn't have been talented if it wasn't for character. You know, you're not just born with that. I mean, a lot of the players will have real game sense, but again, that comes around from playing lots of games and being highly competitive. And to be highly competitive, you need to be determined. You know, you need to have that endeavour. You need to be positive, because, again, one thing, you know, I learned is to actually make it is often, you know, through setback, and that shapes character quite often. So for me, I think that you know, the step up is really a desire on why. It's around opportunity sometimes, but fundamentally, it's about the individual character and how much they want it.
Yeah, the desire to have it is a big one. And, you know, I've played with a lot of players who were so talented over the years and just didn't really fancy it, didn't work hard enough. I mean, one person that comes to mind is this guy I played with at Tunbridge Studians, Toby Seal. And he was a phenomenal athlete, good at everything. Like, really, really, like great at everything. We played a whole season and he didn't miss one kick. 100% kicking record. Didn't miss a kick all season off the tee. And just the vision he had in the game, and it wasn't his main sport. You know, it's just he was a very good runner. Also great at cricket and hockey. But I always thought, what happens if this lad just really focused at being a good tenant at rugby? But it was just never of his interest. And it all comes down to kind of desire and purpose, determination of wanting that. And I think the difficulty is with teenage guys. I mean, I looking in hindsight, I look back to my career, and I'm like, God, if I wanted it a bit more at that age, but there was distractions, right? And thinking, what a job. Why people are going to university? Oh, I got this girlfriend, or there's this party, and it's so simple to kind of get your head right. You might have had it as an outsider in onto my life and other lads' lives. You're like, can't you see the opportunity? It's right there. But when you're a teenage boy, you don't think that way. I think it's quite rare to have. It's difficult, and there's so much distraction around you with exam results, universities, parties, friends, career choices, and there's big kind of maybe you might be able to make it as a rugby player, but the uncertainty, I think, scares teenage guys from committing. But you've seen through the school. Harvey's now starting this weekend for Saracens. You've got Brandon Jackson starting for Saracens, and you've seen that development. And it's another lad as well who's starting this weekend.
Yeah, Nathan, he's captain of the team. Yeah,
Nathan's, yeah, and it's so interesting for me, for you to see that transition from them being a teenager to then starting in the Premiership as a captain of a side. How does that make you feel?
In what way?
Seeing that development, being involved with it.
I think that, there's so much to go into there. I think that through working on the pathway, what I recognised quite quickly was the complexities you spoke about, around all the different, challenges. And actually, it is well spoken about on the programme, and there's been lots of talk and Don Barrell was the head of pathways for the RFU, and trying to move it to actually different age brackets, to actually being under 19s. But again, there becomes challenges around that, post school, and what does that look like? Where other people's commitments can be even more diverse. So it's certainly not perfect, and the way that I sort of constructed the program was to try and give more opportunities for more people for longer, because I think as a young man, sometimes those setbacks can feel quite permanent. Because what life experience have you got to manage that to recognise that actually, if I do apply myself, and then you have the benefit of foresight, when you're in your mid-20s, to look back and go, well, actually, if I'd just done a little bit more, but that hindsight bias isn't true, because that's not the choice you made at the time. So it's very complex. So a lot of it does then come down to the individual and their perseverance, clearly having talent, and that's largely in an athletic front as well as a rugby front. If you're quick, then that's going to be helpful in the game, right? If you're powerful, if you can jump high, if you're 6'7", all these physical attributes, lend itself to the game, because some positions are more competitive than others. And it can be quite a crowded field, especially, if you're playing in the back row at 16, there's a lot of talented 16-year-olds, and especially if they're an early developer, and especially if they're an early specialised rugby player, they've been playing since 6 years old, and they're the son of the coach who's a good coach, and he's brought his son up maybe, and with a rugby ball in his hand, so his training age is slightly more advanced. So it's very tricky, but I think that around seeing those guys further on the journey is something that actually does complete the picture for me. I recognise that there's so many other brilliant, young lads or now young men who are doing different things, and excelling in different ways. So it doesn't have to be rugby, and it could be through S&C. It could be through work, it could be through, any other sort of avenue they want to pursue. So that goes back to those characteristics, and it's what you learn at that moment in the time. But it's definitely true that at that age of sort of 16, to have all those things converging in, 17, 18, around A levels, around girlfriends, around a lot of the lads trying to earn money. For some of the lads, it's around opportunities. So, if they're a single parent family, can't afford for them to go. It's then where's the training venues. It's then what coaching experience have they had. Where are they on their developmental cycle? It's so tough, and that's the view I had when I was coaching everyone. Give everyone the respect. If they wanted to turn up, be there at 6 o'clock in the morning. They deserve your time. And the opportunity to apply themselves, and then if they're lucky along the way, then the rugby thing might work out.
Yeah. And what originally led to post-army into coaching and that transition? Why did you want to get into coaching?
So he's actually a good friend of mine, Matty Stewart. He was in the army, and my early captain in the army was combined services under 21s. He won the European Cup with Northampton Saints back in 2000. So, and he's paratrained, so he's got it all going on. Matty, a great friend of mine. He phoned me up, and it was just after I'd had back surgery. So after I'd done the Middlesex Sevens, and then I took over as director of rugby for the Army Sevens team in 2005. After that, the back gave up the ghost, and I had to have surgery in the end. But he was good friends with a guy called Carrie Wright, and they were looking for a head coach at Elswood Bulls. So I said, why not? I wasn't that mobile at the time, but obviously loved the game. And that was where I sort of earned my spurs in the early days of coaching, and realised that I loved it. And so I did that for probably 6 years before Sutton Valence, but I'd never coached boys before. But my sort of logic behind it was that it couldn't be too much different. I mean, obviously that wasn't the reality, right? You're dealing with a lot of different maturation challenges, but then also psychological challenges as well, maturity issues, which taught me a lot, and it taught me a lot about parenting, taught me a lot about coaching. So I'm forever grateful for that experience. I'd get as much back. How does someone respond to you? And then trying to tweak it the next time around, to try and get the better of the hindsight of experience, to try and guide people in the right direction.
So you went from Aylesford and then moved into Quins before Saracens?
So with Quins, I was on the junior pathway. So this is in 2013. There was a big symposium, and it was around the future of the development of young players. It was boys at the time, but then now obviously extended the pathway to women and girls. And at the time, this big symposium was around all the knowledge of the challenges around development, and what are the key principles around talent development and talent selection for young boys. And then the RFU changed the structure from being a county-led programme where you'd play for Kent and then you'd play for a divisional side, so London and South East was the structure at the time, in the Midlands, the North, the South West, to actually being pushed through the Premiership clubs where they could use their experience and influence to promote a broader pathway based on these key principles. So the challenge around the county game was, because obviously there were so many counties and so broad, and with all the different philosophies, let's say, around development. You mentioned earlier on about you reckon your club team, Tunbridge Wales, would beat Harlequins, and that's not wrong, but is that what you want when you're looking for talent development and talent selection? Where actually, you're looking for people with athletic potential, with the mindset and the skill set at that point to go on to be the next Saracens England player in this case. So your question is around Harlequins. So I joined them right at the beginning of the DPP.
Yeah.
And that was 2013. And that was just as I was getting out of the army. Another one of my closest best mates, Howard Graham, who was the captain of the Army Sevens team. He was the head coach for Harlequins under 18s at the time. And he said, look, jump on board. So I did. So I did that for a few seasons. And then in 2016, a full-time place become available at Saracens. And the timings for it, which is all weekends, evenings, school holidays, didn't conflict with my time at Sutton Valence School. So I put in for it, not expecting to get anything back. At the time, I was coaching the army as well. So I was getting plenty of like fulfillment, through coaching different teams and different environments. But they offered me the job, and 10 years later, I'm still at the club now.
Yeah. And how's your role changed over the years?
So I stayed at that role for 7 years, although it went from a DPP coach with Saracens now. So it was very similar to my time at Harlequins, to then leading with the junior pathway. So junior academy manager, if you like. So I'd look after everything from the under 16s. So largely what I saw when I was the DPP coach was we needed to have an infrastructure. Needed a bit more strategic thinking, needed to provide a lot more parent education, coach education, to be able to express what the program is and what the program isn't. It's not a team to go and win games, but then that's quite contradictory on the outset. If you look at it and you go, well, actually, Harlequins play under 16s games. So then trying to say, well, actually, they're not outcome driven, other than individual performances, like testing in S&C, isn't it? It's like, where are we now? And that's what those games are, rather than let's go and win the national competition.
Yeah.
But that's very different mindsets. That's quite difficult to get across sometimes. And so then I stepped up and was the under 18s coach, as well as leading with the junior pathway. But just about 3 years ago, after I had a bit of a wobble, I sort of spoke to them, and I look back now, and it was very similar to my army days. It was like I needed to be around good people. The program I was leading was quite remote, so it was across Essex, Kent, and Herts, so very broad. A lot of time on my own, and it was interesting talking to your dad earlier on, where he was talking about the brilliant stuff that you do here at the Barnage around community, and part of that is obviously delivering excellence in sort of strength and conditioning sessions, but also people feel part of something, and that certainly was the case for me, and sometimes it's not explicit, but at that point it was like I need to be around good people. And I spoke to the director of rugby and my line manager, the academy manager and the head of performance and the now general manager, and said, look, I reckon I could do a good job as your kit manager. And they said, well, yeah, go on then. Let's give it a go. So as usual, you go on a probation period. So I went from leading the junior pathway and under 18s coach to being the kit manager, and this is my sort of third season now.
And what for you, what else does that entail, being the kit manager? I mean, you obviously have a close relationship with most of the team. What else is involved with the job?
I see my job, and people will view it in very different ways, the other kit managers, that is, but I see my job as they all see it the same, as that we facilitate everyone else in their delivery. So, but for me, it's about trying to reduce every single barrier so they can turn up and then give it their best. So, trying to create that environment. So, for example, it's an open door policy, so if I'm not there, or if I'm doing some other detail somewhere else, then they can go and get the rest of their kit. And if it's not there, they'll know where the top up kit is, so that they can have the right kit to go out there to deliver the best session that they can.
Yeah,
that's my mindset around it. So there's no barriers there. Where all the kit managers will be the same, just try and give above and beyond, to just help, the players and the management to do that, and the coaches. So just being prepared for those different bits and pieces. And I often think about it as, from my background in the military, where, you'd have your storeman, so your battery storeman, and you certainly come across a few in the army days, and stores are for storing, right? So everything comes in, and they're in control, and everything's process driven, and everything's rigid, and no, you can't have that. No, you've had your one pair of socks this month, and that sort of stuff. Where you then have the other storeman who would get up at 5 o'clock in the morning, turn up, give you a bacon sandwich, and give you a fresh pair of socks. Do you know what I mean? So you're always trying to, in coaching's problem setting, that was always my view of it. How do you set a little problem for someone to get over it? And that's where the learning hopefully takes place, to actually, as a kit manager, being a problem solver. So trying to see a problem before it's even a problem. Yeah. And then get around it. It doesn't always work that way. There's obviously a couple of little slips along the way, but then it's like, how do you quickly recover from it? And that's like anything, right?
Yeah. And you enjoying the current job role?
Yeah, very much so. Yeah, I mean, I think it's difficult not to, around some, phenomenal people, and, that's, support staff, as well as players. Within the job, it's a great opportunity to travel, around the country and broader, through the European competition. For me, being on that journey, it's a great way to keep connected with my community, and just see how they're doing. Yeah. And, just sort of share our experiences and try and help out again where I can there, and vice versa. We sort of feed off each other quite a lot. There's nothing better. I mean, when we went to Glasgow, I saw a mate who I hadn't seen for 20 years, and just seeing him just lifts your spirit. Like, Smithy, he's a funny guy. He was our kit manager for our sevens team. So he's 6'7", kit manager who, just some funny times. So yeah, it's the best job. And then of course you're around excellence, and then you've got the diet, and then you've got the gym facilities. So from a personal perspective, being able to train, and keep on top of that.
And what's it like training around some of the pro players? I mean, they must be shifting some big weights.
Yeah, I try not to get down the gym too much when they're there, largely because they'll show me up, and I'm at a different stage in my journey. But also, as you can imagine, it's getting into the strength room when you've got 20, 30 guys, maybe throwing some weight around. It's a highly organised but chaotic environment. So I just sort of keep out of the way, and I'll go and do a little session every now and again with the head of strength and conditioning, Vinny, down there, in our own sort of time where it's a little bit calmer, and quietly got on with my own stuff.
Yeah, I mean, so just to name a few of the players, you've got Atoje, Ben Earl, Jamie George, Elliot Daly in the squad. I mean, these are superstars. And what's the difference between those guys and then your kind of regular Premiership starter? What is the difference between a superstar international athlete that, Ben Earl, I think he's probably going to get up somewhere towards 100 caps in his career. Atoje's all getting there. I mean, he's already is he at 100 caps yet?
He's just shy of it.
Just shy of it. Jamie George is somewhere there around. And
just over it, yeah.
Yeah, and then Daly must be, again, I mean, you know, a plus 50 caps for sure. What makes... is it, being in their presence, I mean, and you know, talking to them, is there certain characteristics these guys have and you're like, oh, that, you know, there's something about them? Or is it just purely... they have a bit more athletic ability than everyone else? And
yeah, I think everyone will be on an individual basis, but I think that the brilliance of the place that we train at is that there's constant interaction. You know, everyone is just sort of falls over each other, and because there's sort of there's an expectation around, you know, being a certain way when you're in that environment. So when you're training, you know, you give it your all, and then when you're off it, it's around, you know, being, you know. So humility is you know, very values driven, let's say. So that as a benchmark, you can imagine that. There's no room for egos. Of course, there are egos. We're all driven by an ego, but you know, not overtly. So everyone's there. They just really enjoy being around each other. Everyone's super friendly, and then when they train, they go hard. Like, you know, I think for the, you know, some of the behaviours that I see. So, you know, Marrow is phenomenal. You know, he'll do a half-time brief, you know, as captain, you know, and he's got his notepad and he's taking his notes and just, you know, very methodical and very detailed in his application. And then, of course, he'll go there and produce on the park. I saw a stat come up today where he's got the most turnovers for England out of any player. You know, so it gives you an idea. You know, that he's a phenomenal athlete, and his behaviours, you know. So, you know, through that again, he'll just be, you know, one of the lads. You know, he loves. I know, I can see that he loves being in the club. You know, he loves being around the people, and when he applies, he really applies. So he's able to switch between the two seamlessly. And I think for some of the younger academy lads, you know, it's a tougher journey because, you know, you're trying to develop physically, you're trying to develop mentally. You know, there's a lot to learn. There's certain behaviours, as I mentioned, that there are expectations, and you know, so there's a lot going on. You know, and it's also the uncertainty around it as well. You know, if you're a young 19-year-old, it's like, wow, you know, I'm suddenly in the same changing room or, you know, same physio room as Owen Farrell and everyone else. So, you know, it's for them, it's an opportunity. And for those who see it like that, who really apply themselves, you know. So again, I think it all goes down to behaviours. So yeah, I don't know if that answers your question there or not really. Yeah,
it's behaviour, I guess, is the main thing. I kind of main takeaway from that, and I guess it's an ability to transition to kind of being in that kind of work hard mindset is fatiguing, and I think being able to kind of switch off really will assist the players of that caliber. You kind of mention that about Marrow, but it's just interesting to hear because I've asked a few other guys who've been around like real talent, like Olympians, etc., and it's sometimes difficult to distinguish what that X factor is, but it mostly comes back to mindset, behaviour, discipline, but also being able to switch off. I find if you probably don't have that switch off, you burn out, overthink, becomes difficult. But Andy, I mean, we've discussed loads of things today, but what your life is at the moment is you're doing a lot of endurance work, And you know, at the pub last night, you mentioned to me you're going to do 2 London marathons back to back. What was? I mean, you've also walked around Wales, which was 1,100 miles in what, a month? You did that?
Just over a month, yeah.
And how much elevation was it?
A lot.
Oh man! And you walked 100 miles across the Hadrian's Wall in 27 hours, I believe. No sleep. What drives you to do that sort of stuff?
I think for me, it's because I've been able to really bore it down. It's around sort of self-regulation.
Yeah.
And you'll remember, you know, the Queen's pub over in Sutton Valence, and you know, you wouldn't know this at the time, but you know, when I was at the school, you know, a lot of stuff that I didn't deal with at the time through the army, and suppression of those things is quite useful, you know, and but they catch up with you potentially, and it was a time for it to catch up with me. So, you know, sometimes I used to go to the Queen's, but then I used to get so stressed. You know, it's a small little pub, quite noisy at times, and it was an odd thing. I didn't know it at the time, but I'm always looking for the exit. And this is common in a lot of environments, but I use that one because you're familiar with it. So, you know, we'd go there as a little sports department, and then within an hour and a half, I'm trying to find the fire exit. And I lived about 10 miles away, and obviously going to the pubs, usually in the evenings, it's usually pitch black, and quite often it's raining. So then walking back from the Queen's back to my place, you know, in the pitch black, in the rain, I felt happy. And I didn't know it at the time, but, you know, that was just me sort of managing to ground myself, really, and just being more at peace in the environments that, you know, I've been very much used to. So I'd go from a very stressful pub, which there's no reason to be stressful, you know, just socialising with people, but I mean, really being quite, I wouldn't say anxious, but, you know, just not myself, you know. A few intrusive thoughts, you know, would just pop in, you know, just because there's little things within those environments which over time have, you know, are not the same, but, you know, sort of teach you that, you know, it's maybe not safe. Of course it is, but it's a behaviour. Your body takes over, and then it takes over your mind, and it's suddenly like, what? I need to get out of here. So doing that, you know, I suddenly found that this was good. And then obviously we went into lockdown, and it was like, yeah, I just keep going, and then just keep going, you know, and you know, I'd regularly, you know, go out and do a 30, 40 mile walk and just feel, you know, amazing at it. You know, it's just, you know, no outside influence, you know, so often, you know, not even worry about the phone, just being at one with nature and all the rest of it. So, you know, with that in mind, when I had a bit of a final meltdown where just everything, I opened up all the boxes at once through COVID, and it wasn't a wise move, or maybe it was, because I've sort of dealt with it or dealing with it now, so maybe it was a wise move, but at the time, you know, it become a real challenge. So I was just going to get away. I was just going to throw in the school, throw in, you know, the Saracens, and just get off, because I just needed to de-stress, because, you know, it was just overwhelming, and that was for quite a long time. But a good friend of mine said, look, you know, just calm down and just, you know, get a grip, really. Just pause a little bit. An ex-Hereford mate, and he told me probably that, you know, a bit of the old PTSD stuff was probably evident. You know, he was extremely experienced, obviously, in that, and, you know, recognised the signs and the symptoms, which I hadn't understanding what it was. So, you know, I took the pause like he suggested. You know, he's a major in the SAS, and he's telling me, right, shut up, get a grip. You shut up and get a grip, right? So, I left it for a bit, and then I went to him with a revised idea and said, look, I'm going to try and get some time off work with Saracens and walk around Wales. And he was like, yeah, you can do that. So I was like, yeah, I got Dave's endorsement. So that was it. I just sort of set out on that, and the club were absolutely amazing. I spoke to my line manager, Mike, and said, look, I just need this little bit of time. And he's like, yeah, not a problem. Let's just get through to the Easter. We had some of the under-18s games, which you'll be familiar with, in the programme. And then he gave me the time off, and I had no idea or expectation of how long that was going to take. And then the oddest thing happened. 3 great mates of mine, just gave up work to come and support me on that journey.
Brilliant.
Imagine that. Just like, yeah, we're coming. Okay. They didn't want to walk, but they did want to drive, and it just become an adventure. So started up at Offers Dyke, and then ended up at North Wales, and I'd never seen the beauty of the coastline in North Wales before, and that just continued. I mean, the coastline around Wales is phenomenal, and that was it. And then I had people joining me all along the way. For a day, 2 days, maybe 3 days along the way, and getting to West Wales is a pig.
Yeah,
I know people who live 10 miles away and they didn't come and see me, but they travel 10 hours to get across Wales. So it was hugely humbling but eye opening, because I was taking this all in and just trying to decompress myself and trying to work it all out. Why was I thinking like this? Why was I feeling like this? And the walking was just the thing, and it was just a nice sort of rhythm. And
I mean, how many miles were you averaging a day?
So on that one, it was probably about maybe 28, 29 miles a day. Yeah. So some days we'd push it. I think I pushed out a 40 mile one day, and other days, I did a 30 miler for the Royal Marines. One of the late lads, Lee, who come to join me, Lee Soper, his son's in the Marines, and that's one of their tests. I mean, obviously, going across Dartmoor with, all your equipment, on the back end of an exercise, and a load of training is very different from walking the coastline and stopping at a cafe. But it was 30 miles, so
yeah.
almost comparable. So that was that, and the real sort of message for me was around community, was around the great outdoors, having that space to think and that time, and just the humility around the small part actually you are in the world, and it really just sort of set me up for. The Wolfpack Pilgrimage was a group that we set out at the time. The idea, obviously, just around the Wolfpack being part of a group. It was a nickname given to us by the Iraqis, actually, out in the Iraq War, which was an idea that Lee sort of put forward. How we're sort of just together and just circling around the danger and just sticking together. But then of course Saracens, with the Wolfpack, and that's it, the idea of togetherness, which is the strength of the wolf as a pack, and the strength of the pack as a wolf, which is a great sort of metaphor for where we are. Certainly this group and the pilgrimage just being the thing, so it didn't have to be around Wales. We've done other things since then, and just sort of even some community gets-togethers and remembrance games and that sort of stuff. So yeah, it sort of evolved really, and now it's more about helping and communicating with my peer group really to get them on the same sort of journey through shared knowledge. I mean, I certainly don't have all the answers, but from a physical perspective, having that sort of experience, I guess, that we can always go a little bit further, and actually by doing that, which is very different, walking somewhere a little bit further within a group compared to when you're 25 and you just want to rip the numbers up and, you know, get the PBs and that sort of stuff. It's different but important. So yeah, just sharing that experience with other people, and yeah, we've done some group challenges since then, which have been pretty cool.
Yeah. And you know, what was the driver and purpose behind all of this? Of is it because of what the community has done for you? You know, getting you through kind of this tough time through COVID, with suffering with your PTSD. Is it just kind of brought to your attention that how much that friendship group around you has helped out? Why do you want to continue it? And why do you want to keep pursuing more?
Yeah, I think that, you know, that sort of metaphor is a good one, you know, around the strength of the wolf is the pack. So that's the argument you're putting across there, which is valid, like, you know, just being part of that community. But then also, you know, if you're part of that pack, then it's the strength of the wolf, and actually, what does that look like? You know, so I feel that, you know, for me, just being able to you know, demonstrate, I guess, you know, is important. But I think also for me, what I've learned over my whole life is, and it was summed up brilliantly. The first day I got into my Regiment 7 para, we had this old wooden hut, which was a gym, and it was just a basketball court with a multi-gym, and it was pretty naff, as you can imagine. It was left over from the 1940s, but we loved it. And there was a sign above the door saying, "Only the fit will survive." And that instantly, as soon as I saw it, it suddenly all made sense. And at the time, that was a very physical thing. But then that philosophy really has stayed with me, but evolved. You know, so what does fit look like? You know, it's okay being physically fit, but if you're not mentally fit, you know, then what does that look like? And what does survival look like? You know, it's no point being the fittest person if you're going to break down another element. So actually, it's about evolution and evolving constantly. You know, trying to get better in different ways. So, you know, that's how that philosophy's evolved for me. So my why really is just around only the fit will survive. You know, healthy body, healthy mind, and adapting to your surroundings. So, you know, that's my driver. But I guess my ultimate driver, and this was really in those darker moments, you know, a few years ago, it's like, well, you know, I'm the father of two kids, like, you know, and I need to be the best version of myself to be the best parent that I can be. And what does that take? What does that require? You know, so, you know, looking after myself physically to be a good role model for them is important. But then also just around the mental side of things, just being present, you know, for them and giving them the best version of myself. And they'll be the judge whether they like that or not. But, you know, it's how I see it. So that's my why really. It's around my kids, and then, you know, just around my survival, which is an evolving piece.
Yeah, I think that's a great note to finish on, Andy. We've been here for an hour and 40 now. Time flies.
I told you I could waffle.
No, it's all great. But thank you very much for coming on today. And I'm sure, I mean, such an interesting story, and you've done so much for your life. A lot of people will take a lot away from it. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Guy.
Cheers.